Welcome to episode 177 of Left Behind Game Club. This week, we start our two-part Final Fantasy VII Remake series. Let's get right into it.
You're listening to the Left Behind Game Club.
Welcome to the Left Behind Game Club, our never-ending attempt to make sure that no game is left behind. I'm your host, Jacob McCourt, and today I have three friends with me. The first friend, you know her, you love her. Her name is Katie Lesperance.
Oh, hello. I'm here to talk about a game.
You weren't expecting me to throw to you,
No,
huh?
I didn't know what to do. I never know what to do. You should move on.
Yeah. Our second friend, Flora Marigold. Hello.
Would kill for a shower.
Great. Excellent, as always. And our third friend, on the show for technically the third time, but really like the second time on a real show. It's Kyle Stephenson. Hello, Kyle.
Hello. Thanks for having me. Great
Of course.
to be here.
I mean, you do 1,000 things.
I do.
You do the trophy room. You're part of 6-1 Indie. You work in the industry. Can you tell folks what you do, what you're all about?
Man, I just platinum video games. That's what I do.
Cool. Very good. Anyway.
Yeah. No.
Come on, man.
No. I'm a host of the Trophy Room, which is a weekly PlayStation podcast. Been doing that for almost 5 years now, a little over 5 years, which is nuts to think about. Also co-founded 6-1 Indie, where we uplift indie game devs and the games that we all love and think more people should be playing. And very recently, late to the middle of late last year, I got a job in the industry. I work at Vicarious PR, doing games PR things. So, yeah, nonstop games. It's pretty cool now that I'm living in.
Mm-hmm. We love
pretty
that.
Nice. Yeah.
Before you got the job in games, I think I kept saying like you are the guy who needs to have a job in games the most, and so I'm glad that you made it.
Thank you. It feels good to be here.
Okay, so something we do with our guests that I don't think we did with you on the last time you were on the show, because we had two new guests, is a segment we call the Gauntlet. And in the Gauntlet, we're just going to give the audience a little taste about what you're all about. Some of these questions are pretty innocuous, but one or two of them might get you in some hot water. Are you ready for the Gauntlet?
I'm ready.
All right. Could I get a gong from one of my co-hosts? Flora, can you gong for me?
Gong.
That was so much better than the last time I tried to gong.
That was a good one.
It was not a gong last time, so I'm happy that you took the reins on that.
Thank you. I was feeling self-conscious immediately.
Yeah.
What is your earliest gaming memory, Kyle Stephenson?
Oh, that's easy. It's actually now a part of the Vicarious website as part of my bio. It's coming down the stairs and watching and listening to my mom scream at Mario and Princess Peach for continuing to get captured in the OG NES game. And ever since then, it's been like, video games are a thing that I love. So that is the earliest memory.
What game do you think you've spent the most hours on in your life?
MLB The Show, just as a franchise. It's easy.
You play it every year.
Every year. I first in the world to platinum last year's game. I try to platinum it every year. Last year, I think it was at 400 hours. 400 hours.
Wow.
I like baseball.
Is there a game that, like, individually you think you've played more than, like, 400 or 500 hours that's not MLB The Show?
Honestly, probably the amount of playthroughs I've done, probably FF7 or 8.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're the perfect guest for this.
Oh, maybe. Who knows?
Have you ever pretended to be sick to get out of something so you could play a video game?
1,000,000%, Jacob.
Do you want to
as a child, as an adult, all the time.
Love it. Vicarious, stop listening.
Oh, not lately. No. Yeah.
What is your most controversial gaming opinion?
Oh boy. Here we go. Here's the hot water. I find Zelda to be boring.
Ooh.
I'm on board.
No.
Yeah.
I'm totally on board.
I'm kind of on board.
I was bored out of my mind maybe 30, 45 minutes into Breath of the Wild. And I never went back.
I borrowed it from co-host Travis Colnut because I was like, I should at least play this. Like, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And then I played it for a bit and I was like, oh, okay, that's it, huh? And then I was like, okay, I need to explore. And then I saw some cool stuff and I was like, oh, there's some cool stuff out there. But I'm still good. And also it doesn't control very well, and that was another problem. But yes, I'm on board.
Sorry, Flora.
Yeah.
Flora's
My
dying.
poor, ever shrinking heart.
I feel like this will soon be an article in Epilogue Gaming.
Now that you planted the seed, it will be.
Kyle, last question for you, not on the run sheet. Outside of Final Fantasy VII, what is your favorite Final Fantasy game?
Wait, outside of Final Fantasy, what's my favorite Final Fantasy game?
No, outside of Final Fantasy VII, what is your favorite?
Oh,
Final Fantasy
got it.
game?
Oh, it's 8.
Okay, why 8?
Unabashedly love 8. I know everyone hates 8 on 8. I really enjoyed Zell a whole lot as a character. This goofy kid who just loves hot dogs and he likes to fight. I just really love the whole mechanic of the junction system and how you can really over-level yourself very early on. I like drawing the magic from enemies, and that's how it works. Guardian Force summons are really cool. Story's a little convoluted, but what Final Fantasy story isn't convoluted? And the Gunblade. It's iconic.
Do you kill God in Final Fantasy VIII?
I mean, what Final Fantasy don't you kill God?
That was a great Gauntlet, Kyle. Thank you for coming. Woo!
Thank you!
All right, so pieces of housekeeping before we get into the main topic, Final Fantasy VII Remake. If you love this podcast, please do us a couple favors. We're going to ask up front, because I know you're not reviewing. Give us a review on your podcast platform of choice, 5 stars, or else take it and send it somewhere else into the ether. Like, don't give negative reviews, though, because that's bad. Send this podcast to a friend, because that's how people hear about podcasts. And make sure to follow us on Twitter at Left Behind Club. That's where we let you know when new shows are coming now that we are on a non-regular schedule. Today, we're talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake, developed by Square Enix Business Division 1, published by Square Enix. It's on PS4, PS5, and Windows, originally released on April 10th of 2020. We start the show with our fast pitch, which is a one-sentence pitch about the game that we are about to play. And because Kyle Stephenson is our wonderful guest today, I'm going to put you up first.
Oh, no. How to pitch a remake. Oh, boy, in one sentence. It's the best remake that's not a remake.
Ooh, nice.
Okay. More details on that later. Flora, why don't you go next?
Tifa Lockhart dating simulator.
Good. Very good. Katie?
Longest prologue I've ever played.
And mine would be lots of filler, but Cloud's a himbo, so it's fine.
Hey.
Such a himbo. We're going to start this discussion that will likely be 2 parts with a very important question. I know, Kyle, you've already sort of dove in a little bit and told us what your experience is with at least 7 and 8. But what is your experience with Final Fantasy VII games in general? And then I'd love to know, like, I know you mentioned all the things, I think, before we recorded that you have played to prepare yourself for Rebirth, but tell us your experience with the Final Fantasy VII games and media.
So it actually all started with 7 back in the day when I first got my PlayStation. That was the first one. It was actually like my first like foray into RPGs just as a whole. And ever since that one, I was kind of hooked. I never actually completed 7 until much later in life. Just because as a kid, I feel like completing an RPGs that never happens. Ever, especially one that has 3 whole discs, which was wild to me. So it was 7 that really kind of got the ball rolling, and then from there, just the RPG floodgates opened up, and Star Ocean, Legend of Dragoon. You got your Tales later in life. So yeah, it's been a fun time.
Have you watched any, like, Final Fantasy VII, the movie, Advent Children?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Advent Children I've watched. It's not very good. I watched it last week. Not a huge fan of it. I fell asleep.
Wow.
It looks cool. It's a lot. The Spirits Within, never watched. And from, like, the... What would you call it? The compendium of FF7 games? Dirge of Cerberus is one I've never touched.
Okay.
Yeah, but that other than that, I've played or tried to take in as much FF7 stuff as possible.
Flora, you when we talked before we started recording, you sort of did the hand motion of I've sort of played FF7. Explain what that means.
Final Fantasy VII, the original, is something that I've tried to play a few times throughout my life, and I have a really early childhood memory of going through it to the point of being sort of released into what I remember as like open fields, like riding a chocobo. I have no idea how far that is. It feels relatively early in my memory, but like it was, I believe, after Midgar, which is where this game sort of like spends its time. I have done that arc a couple different times in my life. And then there was one period in college where I got about that far exactly, and then just never went further for some reason. It wasn't for dislike, I think just got lost or got distracted, or one of those, like, you take a break from a video game and forget what all the icons mean. And that happened a few times leading up to the remake for me. So I've never finished the original, even though I know quite a lot about it.
Okay. And then have you played other Final Fantasy games beyond 7?
I have. Yeah, I've dabbled with a number of them. 13 was the first one I ever finished, even though that has like this really like sort of mixed reputation. And then, of course, we did an episode on 16 recently for the podcast, and then dabbled with a few others. Too scared to ever do 14.
Very good. Katie, more or less?
Less, I guess. I've dabbled with a few Final Fantasies, played 16 completely, did watch Spirits Within. You don't need to, Kyle. Please don't. You'll probably fall asleep for that one, too.
Yeah, I figured.
Did we watch that for cutscenes? I can't remember.
We did do it for cutscenes, and I struggled through it. I think it's my biggest struggle of movie watch of all of the video game movies that we've done, and there's been some bad ones. Some
of them are fine.
Some of them are fine. Final Fantasy VII in particular, I remember as a kid, I don't know if we rented it or if we had a demo, but I remember like the start, like the going in, the bomb, you got to get out fast. I remember that part. And then a few years ago, I was like, you know what? I've never played this game. I need to. Fired it up, played probably the same amount. And then just there were other things that I needed to do. And I'm like, I'm realistically not playing this now. So Final Fantasy VII Remake was always kind of in my library. I think it was a PS Plus game. And I'd been wanting to play it, and I just never got to it. So this was the perfect reason to get to it.
Okay, so I guess among the crowd, I'm the least JRPG-ish among us, where Final Fantasy 16 was sort of my first JRPG, and it's arguably not even a JRPG if you ask most people. And this is a game that I've always sort of looked at and said, like, I just need to understand culturally why everyone swoons over Tifa and Cloud, so I'm going to do it. I'm going to play this video game, and so play through it. It's the first time I've played through, like, I guess what you'd call a core Final Fantasy game, or one that gets closer to the battle system that everyone sort of knows and loves. And I have many thoughts, as I'm sure we all do. But if you want to check out a couple things, if you want to check out our Final Fantasy 16 episodes, I'll link them here. That was a two-parter, episodes 174 and 175. And then also, if you want to listen to Katie and I talk about Final Fantasy Spirits Within, I'll also link that in the resources. You can check that out after you listen to this. We'll start with a question from the community. This comes from Setobox. Setobox asks, how did you play FF7 Remake? PS4, PS5, Intergrade, or PC? Flora?
I originally played day one. Fun fact, this was one of the games I pretended to be sick for at work. So played on PS4, just base model, and then later replayed it when the DLC came out on PS5.
Katie?
PS5 base game.
Kyle?
PS4 day one, because we were all in lockdown. I had nowhere else to be.
Right, April 2020.
Yeah.
And I played Intergrade on PS5. I did not play the DLC. Did anyone else here play the Intergrade DLC that covers Yuffie?
I did, yes.
You did? Quick note on it. I don't think we'll cover it like broadly here, but maybe notes for folks thinking about it. Do you think it's essential to play?
I actually do. I loved it so much. I think the character Yuffie is amazing. It has this card game. I think it's called like Fort of Condor or something. It's actually been a long time since I played it. I think it's perfectly paced for what a DLC should be. If you like the main game, it really doesn't have a lot of the things that I might later criticize in the episode, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, if there's any like goodwill after you hit credits, definitely try the DLC.
Kyle?
As a lead up to Rebirth, just to learn more about Yuffie, I would say absolutely. Yeah, it's a very good take on that character, and they took what she was in the OG game and kind of made her fit more in what the story will be. Because she comes in the OG way later than she does in this current timeline. But yeah, it's definitely well worth it.
We keep alluding to current timeline. I think it's probably fair to say that we will talk maybe a little bit about the original Final Fantasy VII, but this will be largely focused on Remake because this is a planned trilogy. When it was first announced for my Final Fantasy VII fans, maybe I'll start with you, Kyle. How did you feel when they announced that it was going to be a trilogy? Did you lose your mind? Or were you like, oh no, 3 games I have to play now?
Initial thoughts was, I got to make sure I stay alive to experience the whole thing.
Because that takes like 14 years for 3 games to come out. Absolutely.
Yeah. And we're going to be, what, a decade and 2 games in since it was first announced? So, yeah, you're pretty close to that 14 years there, Katie. Yeah, at first I was like, hell yes, finally. I can't wait to see what it is. But the 3 games thing bummed me out. And we'll get into it, but just knowing that this remake was only in Midgar was a bit of a bummer.
Okay.
It's something I waited for so long. I was like, oh, we're only getting Midgar? And then, yeah.
It's M9 Prime from the community dropped a note saying that this was in 2005. It was announced or seen as a tech demo and then properly announced at E3 2015. So just to show you, like, 10 years when Rebirth comes out and then possibly up to 15 when this whole thing comes out. So
And when it was unveiled at E3 2015, that was a whole different team that was working on it. And Square was like, oh, we're not liking the way this is looking. And then they just kind of completely took over.
Crazy. Flora, any comments there before we dive in and talk about Midgard?
I don't think I had any reaction to this splitting apart of the story necessarily. I think I naively assumed that was matching the way that the original game was split apart onto discs or something. And it just sort of naturally made sense that there was no way you could fit a game that was scaled up graphically and story-wise and with all the additional assets of voice acting and so forth into a single disc. And so I just thought it was as simple as that rather than a complete reimagining, which is ultimately what this seems to be.
Let's dive in on and talk about the actual setup of this one. There's going to be a lot of words that are going to be thrown about. Mako, Soldier, Midgar, Cloud Strife. So maybe we'll take turns and sort of pile on top of each other and talk about the setting. Katie, why don't you start first and start the base foundation about what we start and see when we open on Final Fantasy VII Remake?
I mean, I think that the intro is the most beautiful part of this entire game. Like, that got me pumped up because there is this cinematic cutscene that is showing you Midgar, which is this city that is owned by the Shinra Electric Company. Hilarious. I'm sorry. And they are using Mako, which is like the energy of the earth, to power this city and make a lot of money and basically have complete control over this city. So there's this opening cutscene that is like a drone flyover of Midgar, and you're going through streets and above and flying around, and it is gorgeous. It's one of the most beautiful cutscenes I've ever seen. Of just like showing you this environment. Yeah, it's stunning.
If you ever watch the OG intro, that is what it is. Just kind of updated to the way it looks now. And it was definitely kind of a mind-blowing kind of like, oh my God, this is how I remember it as a kid, even though it's nowhere even close. Yeah, it just brings me chills every time I see it because that is such an iconic opening to the point where the drone gets up to the top and then you hear the train rolling and it cuts in between.
Yes.
And then you get right into it. Like it's pretty awesome.
I think the thing that surprised me most is I always had this perception that was wrong as a new sort of Final Fantasy player that like all Final Fantasy games deal with like literally they are fantasy settings. They are not like future corp has destroyed world, let's show the slums in the city. So knowing very little coming into Final Fantasy VII, I guess I was just surprised at how they tackled stuff like pollution, like income inequality. Like I just don't think that that's a thing that this game would tackle, and I I have issues with some of the stuff in the game, but I think that largely I was shocked at how they have built a world that feels lived in and like the game has a point and a perspective to share about like that particular worldview or the way that some people like to operate.
To your point, just before we get to Flora, is that my my spouse walking by, as he often does while I'm playing these games, looked at it and was like, wait, but you played another one of those. You played that new one that just came out. That looked really different. What? That guy's got a sword, but like there's no castles and stuff. I don't understand. And I'm like, there's a lot of different things happening in every game. We're doing some crazy stuff. And he goes, yeah, but, and I was talking to some very exuberant character who was very wacky. And he said, this looks more like Yakuza than it does Final Fantasy. And I'm like, sometimes it does. That's all. I thought that was amusing.
It's funny you say that because I actually was going to make potentially the comparison to Cyberpunk, which came out like same calendar year. And it's only briefly that those comparisons really like have any weight to them. But when Jacob brought up like the social issues comparison thing, like I thought that like for a Final Fantasy game to tackle something like that, like it does also have all the fantasy elements to it, but I think they're sort of like they're saved for the second half of the game rather than actually front loaded whatsoever. And I think that's a really interesting thing that like Kyle, I was sort of nostalgia goggling my way through the intro, but when I came through to a replay, I was struck by like how sort of like technocracy this whole place was.
Is Cloud the protagonist you thought he would be?
Based on like compared to the first game or just in general playing a Final Fantasy game?
Both. Take it how you will.
He was much more emo teenager than I thought he would be. And very like monosyllabic answers and like, were you in the war? He's like, maybe. I'm like, okay, like you could warm it up just a little bit. And eventually he kind of does, but then he can tell that he's getting too warm and he reverts back. I don't know. I had kind of heard about Cloud. I kind of heard that he was a little emo. That's the best word I can come up with. And that, so it happened and I'm like, oh, I kind of like it. It's kind of fun. Instead of like, after playing Final Fantasy 16, where he is like super noble and like, I care about my people. And Cloud's just like, I care about no one. I'm Cloud Strife, which is a great name. Also.
I care about making money.
Money.
Yeah. I think for me, it was like the Cloud was such an interesting like counter to the rest of the crew that was like, oh boy, terrorism. Am I the only one who thought the tone was really weird? I
know this is a podcast, but I want that clipped out.
You got it. You got it. Just for you. But honestly, like Barrett, Tifa, and the crew of Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse were just like very pleasant about blowing up a reactor that's going to affect people's lives. Fair point. The tone was just weird for me.
I don't know. I disagree.
Okay.
It was also their first time, right?
Yeah.
That was the first time they've actually done it. So like, just imagine them. Imagine you and your friends who
doing
are
terrorism.
A rebel group talking about it, like, oh, we should do something, and then this is their actual act of actually finally setting forth the plans and hiring the merc that is Cloud. I like Cloud. He is an emo boy, and it's kind of hard to go fully into Cloud without spoiling things about him. Mm-hmm. But I think they did him a much better service here in the remake than they did the OG.
Oh.
There's definitely more layers to him now than there was in the original game.
I think it's fair to say that I just didn't realize these characters are as young as they are. Like Barrett has a child, he's a father, and I sort of love Barrett.
Yeah.
But everyone else is essentially 21, 20, 22. So like maybe I just need to chill on the fact that these are essentially teenagers doing terrorism for the first time, so I just have to get over it. I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna get flagged. Someone's gonna hear Jacob McCourtin with the words terrorism, and I'm just gonna end up on some list.
Oh boy,
Rebellion.
terrorism.
Rebellion Uprising.
There you go. There you go. Avalanche.
Yeah.
What is Avalanche?
it's their name.
Yeah, it's the name of their rebellious group. Yeah. You know what? For like 21-year-olds and their first, like, I'm assuming rebellion group, it's not a bad name. It's a pretty good name. It could have been worse.
I can't think of a better one.
No.
Yep.
Could have been like Team Freedom or something. I don't know. It could have been really, really bad.
Out of the side crew, I know I mentioned, and I'm sure we're going to talk at length about, Tifa, Barrett, Aerith later. But out of the side characters, I don't want to give them side characters, but like the non-playable Avalanche members of Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse. My understanding is these characters have been largely fleshed out from the original game. Did we have any favorites? Because hearing Badger from Breaking Bad as Wedge sort of really threw me here.
Wedge is definitely a highlight in Remake, for sure. Also, for all the newbies in Final Fantasy, in most Final Fantasy games, there is a Biggs and Wedge character.
Oh.
So this continues here. It's because I believe the creator of Final Fantasy loves Star Wars so much that he wants a Biggs and Wedge character in every game. And there's also a Cid as well in most of them, but we haven't met Cid yet in the remake. I think Wedge is easily a standout, but the way they fleshed Jessie out is really, really cool. And getting more to her story in this one, like actually going to her parents' house and like actually having her as part of some missions, that is not even in the original game. So they did a really good job of making all the characters feel like they actually live here than just necessary to move the plot forward.
Yeah, I felt like they all lived there. I felt like they were all friends, which is really important. Like, I feel like there is a pre-existing relationship here. I love Barrett. Barrett's great. As soon as Barrett started singing, I was like, oh, Barrett's my dude. I love Barrett. Yeah. And then there's another time he's singing, and then he's like, we're going on an adventure. And I'm like, oh my God. He's like, we're trying to find some treasure. Loved it. Also, just the fact that he's kind of like a bull in a china shop who is just going forward at all times and is really, really passionate. But then also they'll be like, your kid is sleeping upstairs, be quiet. And instantly it's just like, oh my God, Marlene. Like, he just reels it in. And that's the one thing that can stop this bull from just like going forwards, is he will just stop. Love Barrett. Wedge is Garl, and Garl is Wedge from Sea of Stars, basically. Loves his friends to death.
I love that comparison a whole lot.
Very
That's
similar.
Great.
Yeah, I appreciate Wedge. I enjoyed all of the characters. Like, all of that main set of characters, I liked a lot.
When it comes to all the side characters, I kind of question how much, like, there are moments where I feel sincere attachment to them and other moments where I feel a little bit of, like, secondhand embarrassment or cringe about how, like, their lines are written.
Oh, yeah.
It's not the voice acting necessarily. I thought it was, on the first playthrough, I thought it was the voice acting. But on the second playthrough, like, some of the lines and some of the context of the lines that they're expected to deliver are just really strange, and they really make me, like, struggle to connect with them as these, like, core central community characters for a little bit. But at the same time, without spoiling what happens, the ending of these characters' arcs in this game moved me in a way that I didn't anticipate with that initial impression. And so, like, on one level, I think I didn't want to like these characters. And on another, I think by the end of the game, I certainly did and feel like a deeper attachment to them.
As far as the writing goes, I did kind of make note of this, that there's some cringy writing that I just kind of shuffled to the side. And I kind of attached that to like a 97 game vibe. Like, a lot of them felt like 1997 JRPG characters in a way, and the way, even the expressions that they're making and the things that they're saying to each other. And I kind of just took that as like a throwback instead of wanting them to be very realistically written, like every single sentence. So that didn't bother me, but I did feel that, where it felt a little, not cardboard cutout, that's not fair, but more just like almost like cliched old school JRPG.
I think there's some really huge archetypes in here of like Johnny, who's voiced by Yuri Lowenthal, who just is like the slapstick sort of anime dude who could very much appear in a Yakuza game. And then you have folks like Marl, who like occasionally have lines where they're like, you know, insinuating things about Cloud and the ladies that he's bringing back to his hotel or the room where he's staying. We're like, that's fine. But I think my issue, and this may be blasphemous to say this like so soon, but Aerith's a real anime damsel, and that is not performance, that is writing. And Katie's already making a face.
I'm thinking. The thing is though that there are seeds planted where I'm like, oh, I know we're gonna go places with Aerith, whereas I don't know that about Tifa. Like, having not played the original, not knowing where the story goes, I'm like, oh, I can see where there are things that we are going to get to with Aerith. But I'm like, Tifa, I don't know. Is this it? This might be it. And I can't tell.
Very fast rebuttal, and then I want other people to jump in. I will give you the credit that Aerith, even over the arc of Remake, definitely there was like a level of maturity that, you know, she kind of slid into near the end of the game. So I think my issues are mostly with maybe like the first 80% of this game, until we maybe figure out what she is.
It feels like she secretly knows things. Like there's a knowingness behind this like pretend naivete that I'm like, ooh, what is it? What's going to happen? Whereas again, Tifa, I'm like, I don't know.
Katie's been paying attention. To this game.
Yeah. Kyle, you look like you're exploding, ready to tell something.
Oh my God, it's so hard. It's so hard to talk specifics without spoiling Rebirth, because a lot of your answers and your issues with certain characters, I guarantee will probably be answered in Rebirth. And there are reasons why they are kind of the way they are in Remake. But I totally get it. Like, even when I went back and replayed the OG one, Barrett is just a caricature of like a typical black man in the Asian viewpoint, and it's really tough to see. And what John Eric Bentley made Remake Barrett in Remake is so much better, and I actually feel for him. He easily became one of my favorite characters in Remake, where in the OG I loved and appreciated him, but he was nowhere near my favorites. He was kind of like a throwaway, except for a certain area of the game. But it's still like, I think I forgot who brought it up earlier, but they definitely Yakuza-fied Remake. They definitely were like, let's get wacky with Final Fantasy like Yakuza, and that's why we have all these mini games. And even though the wall market stuff is pretty true to the original game, which is the wackiest I think in Remake by far, but I like them.
Do you find yourself playing older games and wishing that there were new discussions about those games? Enter Tales from the Backlog. Hi, I'm Dave Jackson, and on each episode, I'm joined by a guest to break down those games that may be stuck in your ever-expanding backlog. Each episode looks at one game in depth, focusing on mechanics, story, music, and other aspects with no spoilers until a clearly marked spoiler wall in the middle. If you've played the game, go ahead and climb that spoiler wall and enjoy in-depth story discussions, and if not, jump out when we warn you and maybe go play that game for yourself. We have over 100 episodes in the feed, everything from Disco Elysium to Tunic to discussion episodes about how to get into horror games, and if games actually need to be fun, or if they have more to offer. I guarantee that there's something in there for everybody. Once again, that's Tales from the Backlog, available wherever your podcasts are found.
Do you feel like you're the only person in your circle who wants to go deep about video games regularly?
We were like that too, until now.
Welcome to Crossplay Conversations, the brand new bi-weekly topical video game podcast from Luke Lewis,
Joseph Hooper,
and Jacob McCoy.
With many years of breaking it down separately on shows like the Left Behind Game Club, Player Podcast, and Lukewarm Games, the gang is finally coming together to publish their gaming group chat in audio form every other week.
Expect roundtable reviews of the latest games, profiles of upcoming indies, and insightful conversations about essential topics in the video game industry. All with a mostly positive, insightful, and fun style.
Help us out by subscribing on your podcast platform of choice to get the first episodes delivered straight to your feed.
And follow us on Twitter at Crossplay Convos for updates about the show.
Cheers and happy gaming.
Can we agree though the villains are very anime? Like they're incredibly anime.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Shinra and Hojo and Heidegger, who's voiced by Marcus Phoenix from Gears of War, John DiMaggio, anime. Writing and the performance maybe a little bit, but more writing than anything.
I would say that, like, is there a character that isn't anime? Yeah. Like I don't think we have to target just villains here. I was hesitating on saying this, but I feel like from Cloud's perspective as the protagonist in this game, you get an almost like Doki Doki Literature Club level of young women like throwing themselves at you relentlessly, and it pushes me out of the story a little bit. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I see what, like, dare I say, fantasy the creators are trying to get you as the player to indulge in, and like for what purpose, right? Like y'all were just talking about like what these characters might be up to later on in the story. But with the villains as well, it felt to me like, if we're gonna talk Yakuza-fied, I think some of like the best voice acting and some of like the lines where I like held my controller up at the sky were like how cheesy and like Naruto villain-esque some of these were. I love how they've like brought those characters to life in this remake.
Yeah, specifically Yuri as Johnny. Johnny is a nobody in the OG game. And he's fully fleshed out here, and with the Rebirth trailers, he's back, which is wild. So it's, I like how far they take these ancillary characters from the original game.
I will say, with all of the villains, it did feel like part one of a trilogy, and we are trying to jam all of these characters in, and to the point where I'm like, why? Like, I had a hard time feeling like which ones are important. Because there's probably like 8 different ones. Like, okay, I have a spiel here. Shinra, it to me is like a shining example of like corporate redundancy. Like, there are managers managing managers on top of other managers. I don't know what any of them do. I'm sure that they're important in some way, and I'm sure they make a lot of money. But does any of them do anything? Like the one, all she did, she propped her legs up on like a soldier, a stool, like a human stool.
Yep, that's Scarlet.
Which was awesome. But also I was like, who are you and what do you do? Like, and that was kind of my issue with a lot of them. I was like, oh, you're cool. I don't know what you do or why you're important to this story.
If I'm not mistaken, Flora, because it's been a minute since I played the DLC, I think Scarlet shows up in the Yuffie DLC.
I think so.
Very briefly, yeah.
I don't
so you
have
get a little bit more of
attachment.
her in that. Yeah.
I think you're right, though.
Yep.
Yeah, there's just too many.
She's a PR
But you're not
person.
wrong.
She was
They
on
don't
TV.
do anything.
She was on TV talking to the media, was she not? She's a PR person. We all get it.
Again, there's too many. There's just too many. I feel like there are like too many villain characters where I did not get invested in any of them. Because I'm like, well, there's a bunch of them. So why do I care about this one? Like, whenever we showed them, I didn't care. And it was one of my plot issues, like plot pacing issues.
I think a weird paradox with that, because I agree that I think more context and more spacing between these villains might like make me appreciate who they are a little more. There are these moments in between, like for like sometimes hours in the later game where you don't get a single boss like that. And you just get a bunch of just like sort of run around and like hit triangle on a bunch of doors and pipes and then like hit these little grunt enemies back to back like a Pokemon dungeon. And I kind of wish like, hey, if we're going to throw 13 villains in the first 4 hours, let's just push some of them into later content. That way I can appreciate and like chew on their place in the story a little more. So I think that's rather unfortunate, all things considered.
It's to tease. It's like MCU. You'll see a lot of them again. They'll be back.
Palmer leads the space program. Reeve is head of urban development. Hojo's head of the lab.
There you
Scarlet's maybe PR. Heidegger is head of the army. Rufus is the vice president and his son. And President Shinra is the president.
Okay, there.
You nailed it.
Okay, business boy over here is like, it makes perfect sense why there's 17 managers. Why wouldn't there be?
You need redundancy.
Yeah, of course.
Anyway, I think we'll revisit some of these characters later, but what I'd love to do is talk about the actual core of the game, the gameplay, the battle system, and sort of like how this game may be different than other Final Fantasy games. If you listen to our Final Fantasy 16 episode, that is about as close to an action RPG. That is a stylish action game, where this is very much like an ATB based real time, but you can pause sort of battle system. I loved it. And I think it's sort of unique to Final Fantasy games. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah.
I see nodding. Okay.
Yeah.
I love the battle system. It's the best part of this game.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the way to adapt from the OG that was turn-based, I think this is the best way to do it, where it has a little bit of that flair in, where you can take your time and kind of plan things out if you want, but it's still fast-paced enough for the moment-to-moment for you to feel really, really cool. Mm-hmm. Like, I'll be totally honest, when you first play and you're only doing like 5 to 10 damage per swing, I'm like, oh, this doesn't feel great. But when it like prolongs boss battles and every boss battle feels epic because of that, and you have to be on your A game and make sure your materia is set and you have the right loadout and everything, I loved it. And I do love that there is an option if you do want to do full on classic and everything is like paused. You can do that if you want, but I think this is the good medium between like 16, which is crazy action, which I enjoy, but this to have a little bit of a breather and really think things out during a hard fight is very welcome in Remake.
Do you think that having played it to completion and like platinumed it, that means you played on hard, like you just mentioned, Kyle, like the sort of like materia set thing? Like, do you think that second playthrough was what cemented your enjoyment of the battle system, or do you actually think it happened over the course of the first playthrough?
It very much so. It was the second.
Okay.
It was the hard playthrough, just because in hard they take away your use of items, so you have to. And the only way you can heal is on benches, like in between fights.
What?
Yeah, dude.
I haven't done it yet. I'm not brave enough.
And there's like additional fights in Chadley's little virtual thing that you have to do with against other summons and whatnot. But it's very much like I liken it to like Last of Us Ungrounded, where it just kind of feels like you have to be so involved in every part of the combat system, and you just get a new appreciation of switching between characters and making sure that you have somebody with cure and actually using the yellow materia in the hard mode, which I didn't use at all in the normal one, really. A hard mode definitely made me appreciate it way more.
I really, really like the combat system. I think it is an excellent adaptation of, like we said, the original, old school turn-based Final Fantasy. It kind of solves a lot of problems. Like, you can't, because it's real time, but you can't just like spam potions. Like, you have to be strategic about what you're doing and when. I like that performing actions will, fill your ATB meter faster. So it's like you can't just be a passive person. If you're running around the edges, you need to run fast because that thing's not going to fill up and it's going to take a while. So like, I like how it's set up. I like the materia, like slotting in. I feel like it's very customizable. That's great. The combat, the more and more I played it, the more I disliked it. Like, by the end, by the last third, I was kind of over it for specific reasons. Mostly just like there are things that are frustrating with this game where there's like this clunkiness that like a lot of things just aren't that smooth. I was getting frustrated that like you get interrupted so much. Certain spells like is like kind of time delayed, like your ice spells. You cast them, that enemy better be in that same spot. And if they're not, it's wasted. And then some enemies, it's like, oh, that enemy is weak to ice, but it also runs around the arena at an extreme speed and you can't use your ice. Like, there are just certain things that where the setup for combat frustrated me to no end. that, I don't know, in the room sometimes, if there's multiple enemies, it's very easy for them to just start interrupting you one after the other. And now you're just like, oh, I can't do anything. I'm just getting thrown in the air like 4 consecutive times. And yes, you can switch to your other combatant and then like do something else in that way. But it just, I don't know, there's a clunkiness that just bothered me. And then the same thing with like some of the traversal has kind of the same clunkiness where that when you're Tifa, and you have to jump from platform to platform and you're like overhand monkey barsing around. And if you're not like in the perfect spot and facing the perfect way, she just doesn't move. And you're like, where am I? And you got to move the camera to see exactly where you are. And like, oh no, I have to move a hair to the left and now I can go. It's just things like that it made the gameplay not that enjoyable to me. And I wanted it to be. Like, I wanted it to feel better than it did, I guess. And I feel like the combat had a little bit of that too, where it's like, sometimes it doesn't feel that good. And I want it to. And that's kind of like my main issue with the game. The thing that affected my enjoyment the most is I was like, I don't enjoy playing it. I want to like see the story. I want to see what happens. I want to spend time with these characters. I like micromanaging the materia and all that and my equipment. But it's just like actually playing the game, I don't think it was that much fun. And it was disappointing to me.
Do you think that was initially your impression with the combat, or do you think that the like surrounding gameplay, like you mentioned a lot of traversal stuff, do you think that stuff then made you look with more scrutiny at the combat?
No, the combat it's its own thing. Also, sometimes
Really?
the camera, if you auto lock on something, the camera is all over the place. It's in bad spots. You're like, where am I looking? I can't even use auto lock now. They're separate problems, but like together, they made the overall gameplay moment to moment not that enjoyable for me.
So I think a lot of the challenges that you had with combat are a little bit different than like when a lot of us complained about Final Fantasy 16 and like how you couldn't upgrade the weapons. I know it's different, but just that is a thing that should be better in that game. Why are we buying weapons when the number just goes up? Like, not needed. I could get over some of the issues because I agree with you. I agree with you that getting interrupted when you were casting a spell was annoying. Having to use your own gauges to use items, like, get it, didn't love it. Some of the air juggles at times, especially with Tifa, were very tough if you were using an enemy that was like far up in the air. But that was stuff that I don't want to say I got used to it. Like, I don't want to give the game a pass. But I was like, the actual meshing of your party and like, the party isn't really even interacting with, combo moves or anything like that at this stage, but just figuring out when to use certain party members when, and then having each party member have different materia and like strategizing about materia and when to use and what to have on each party member, for me, sort of lets me cast a blind eye to some of the things that I find are a little annoying.
That's fair because yes, you're right. Like I said, the combat system I think is excellent. But how it feels to do the combat to me was not fun, which is the total opposite of Final Fantasy 16, where I had issues with how the combat system is set up, but it was just more enjoyable to play. And I like the system being good. Like, I want the system to make sense and feel like I'm involved. So, yeah, it's a conflict for me.
No, I mean, I could definitely feel that. I think it's tough when you're trying to adapt something that is from such a classic turn-based thing and not go full on action. It's this game in its whole is about appeasing the fans of the OG and making sure that it is remembering its roots but also bringing it to modern times. And I think maybe some of it got lost a little bit. And I feel you on some of the camera stuff. I feel you on the interrupting because that did happen a whole lot. For those moments, like with the ice spell thing, when that would happen to me, I would just take one of my other characters to get real close to melee them to keep them in place, and then I would hop back and kind of do ice spells.
Smart man.
But I'm sure that's not how it should have happened. I'm with you though. It should just hit no matter what, but. It was a delicate balance, and I feel like they'll nail it down for the next one.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too.
did we have any favorite strategies as we entered the battles, or that we used with certain characters? Because when thinking about, cause I just finished the game like 24 hours before recording, and I know for you, Katie, it's even less. Sorry to put you on blast like that, but I'd love to know, like, were there abilities or materia that you found yourself using more of the time than you thought you would?
No, it's about what
For me, for example, like, I loved using like Barrett's maximum fury ability.
Yeah.
The one where he can just sort of, they're tied to the actual weapons. So the weapon system is basically like, you will buy a weapon and each weapon has an ability tied to it that if you use a certain number of times, you can unlock it to use it whenever, whether you're using that weapon or not. And so for me, it was Barrett's maximum fury was something I used all the time. Cloud's triple strike all the time. Star shower from Tifa all the time, and Aerith, like, Ray of Judgment is something I used all the time, and I wonder if y'all had abilities that you leaned on that were not those ones, because those were overpowered in my mind.
Yeah, I think I used those similar ones, because those are just abilities that don't require mana points, and yeah, do a bunch of damage. They're great. A lot of fun. I don't know. I would mainly stick to Cloud, and then when other people are available, I'd flip over. I'd use their abilities, or obviously in some instances, you're better off using a different character like Barrett, and then you just switch over entirely. I liked when it forced you to have a different party. I was like, oh, okay, we're Tifa and Aerith now. This is fun, and it kind of made me do something different, which I appreciated. But yeah, I just kind of went with what are they weak to, and then used my strong damaging abilities a lot. And a lot of healing. Oh my god.
Yeah, I don't know that I used a ton of strategy in this game, weirdly enough. I don't know that this game really demands it of you on the normal difficulty. I would sort of just kind of alternate between who is available at any given moment, and it's no secret that Tifa's like my favorite character in this game, and like playing as her in combat was just really fun. I really enjoyed it, and like this, I actually weirdly used the same moves that you did, Jacob. Like I distinctly remember, like
wow.
That's basically what I did. There might be some daylight between us, but very similar. And it's more like either I want to feel like I'm doing something dynamic, or I want to keep my distance, and that's sort of like what this combat allows for. And so I don't know. I sort of improvised the whole time. I didn't really put a lot of like chess piece analysis into Final Fantasy VII Remake.
I very much just love using any of Cloud's moves. Very like Braver.
Yeah.
It was a limit break from the OG game, and it's just exactly.
Is there
just
a tentacle?
Use it whenever
Braver.
I could. Exactly. But the one that I thought was the most useful was Aerith's Arcane Ward, where you can stand in it and do 2 magic spells for no additional cost. I remember that being a huge help in the Hell House fight. So that was the one I made sure I used the most of, but I didn't really like seek out and make sure that I was going to use them all. It was just kind of like spur of the moment kind of thing.
I think for me, like we talk about the abilities and liking those, and the materia, I don't think we need to dive in like deeply on it. But the thing that I found was unnecessarily convoluted was the actual weapon upgrade system.
Oh, I autoed that hard.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
I should have done that. I'd have saved so much time.
Yeah, once it was like, I was getting into it, and I did it for the first little bit, probably the first quarter of the game. And then once I like upgraded another weapon, or if I changed weapons, and I'm like, oh, I have to do it again, which I appreciate that you can then upgrade different things based on that weapon. I'm like, that makes sense that I should be able to do that, but I didn't want to. Like, I'm like, I don't want to spend this much time in this menu on like hopping around and seeing which ones are there. And I was like, no, I'm just going to auto prioritize attack, throw it in there, and then my weapons are upgraded. Like, it was just one extra thing on top of the materia that I didn't feel was necessary. Instead of just having the weapons be different, that's fine. You could just have them be different and have them have different strengths and weaknesses. I don't think you needed it. So I do think it was overly convoluted. But they had the option to just skip it. So I'm like, great, thank you.
Yeah. That was just like extra gamey stuff to have in it, just for sake purposes. That was a sentence that didn't make any sense. But like, I definitely think the weapon should just be different and just have base like strength upgrades or defensive upgrades or whatever, and just have more materia slots. To add more RPG-ness to it, just tied to the weapons, wasn't needed.
Yeah,
they didn't have to do it.
Anything else you guys want to cover on combat, or the weapon upgrade system, or any of the systems?
I love how summons fight with you.
Yeah.
Yes. Can you explain how the summon system works?
Yeah, so OG in most Final Fantasy games, you would just do a summon, they would do attack, and they would leave. Here you summon them, and they are fighting alongside with you, and that is just so cool. I wish that I didn't get to any summons in my replay before we sat down. Do the rest of your party disappear? I forget.
No.
Is it just
No.
they're all there fighting
there
as well? Okay, good. Yeah, so just having the whole crew there on top of a summon, just for an extra kind of like, let the big bad boss take your eyes away from your party members for a little bit, so you can either heal up or just watch them do their thing. It was great. It's a very Pacific Rim. Just have two kaiju things fight while you're just standing there. It's great.
Yeah.
And the cool part that I didn't realize is like some of them are tied to Chad Lee, who's one of the characters. He's like a Shinra researcher. You go into a VR battle where you will fight, you'll fight a fat chocobo, and you'll fight the ice
Shiva.
Shiva. I was like, not Shinra, Shiva. But you'll also pick up some of them in the world. Like I believe you pick up Ifrit. Keep me honest here. Is Ifrit a VR mission, or is
you just get Ifrit?
Something you pick up in the
I think
world?
that's like the base summon that like is given to you pretty early in the game. Yes.
But I guess you could pick up one or two of them in the world too. Mm-hmm. Like there's a regular chocobo that you can also get in the world.
Yeah, I had a chocobo in Moogle. I think Moogle. Mm-hmm. That would just come and hang out. I agree with you, Kyle. That it's fun instead of it just being like an attack. And it's like, oh, a pretty attack, and it looks the same every time and whatever. It's fun. But yeah, no, he just comes in, hangs out with you for a little bit, fights. You can do like summon attacks with your ATB meter while it's there with you, while it's fighting with you. And then at the end, does like a big attack and leaves. It's more involved than if it was just like a one-off attack, do some damage, leave. Because then it could just be a spell. Like, what's the difference, really? But this is, it's more involved. I like it.
One last note before we talk about the story of Final Fantasy, which I think will be, or VII Remake, which will be mostly the bulk of what we talk about with the rest of our time, is I guess I was surprised in this one. I wasn't expecting an open world, but I had just played Final Fantasy 16, where like you can go anywhere. And with 7, you are really confined to certain areas at certain times of the game. They're very directed and saying, you are going to be in these slums. You are going to be in this sector at these times. I don't know if, like, it wasn't that I didn't love it. It's really just, like, not what I expected. I sort of expected, given that you see the map of Midgar, in one of the pause screens, that you could go wherever you want, whenever you want. But they really confine you to, like, hey, for this section of the game, you're going to be here and you can't go anywhere else. Is that, like, for people that have played the original, like, is that just something that I need to get over and, like, Rebirth will be a different game and more open world for you, boy?
Yes, absolutely. Midgar in the OG game, you could get through if you're familiar with it, and now on like the PS4 version, you can use the boost to like speed up combat, whatever. You can get through it in 6 hours.
Crazy.
It's very, very quick. It's definitely used as the introduction of the game. But where we are at the end of Remake and in the OG game, immediately once you're done with the Midgar stuff, the same kind of thing, then you walk out and it is open world. And you can go wherever you want. And back in the day, it was kind of mind-blowing. It's like, oh my god, I could just go wherever. But I do love that they kind of kept it traditional in this one for not just nostalgia reasons, but there are story reasons as well as to why you're only allowed to go where you're allowed to go in Remake. I kind of dug it, even though it's Midgar might not be my favorite place in FF7, but it's definitely one of the most iconic, so I understand.
I kind of found it a little frustrating to play, especially playing it a second time. And I don't know if that's because I'm spoiled and I'm thinking about the Yakuza comparison here, where like the Yakuza games are a really tight-knit area, but they're just so densely packed with things to do and discover. Whereas this game has, I want to say, like 25 side quests in total. And what you do in between all of those areas is comparatively minimal. And so like it's a mixture of like I can handle being confined and enjoy myself, but to have very little to do in that confined space and just be like just running between waypoints, which is really ultimately what you do the whole time in this game. I found that to be a weakness that I really hope that like the next game addresses a little more directly in its design.
Yeah, and it was made more apparent to me because of how things were set up, because of how the side missions were set up. And then all of a sudden they're spread around and I have to get to different places, but it's not clear exactly where it is. And it's, for a lot of the game, you just have to like go there. And also certain things are set up in a way where it sounds like I should be able to do it any time. Like the kids in their little hideout, and they're like, oh, come back to me with your Moogle medals and we'll exchange some stuff. Yeah, anytime. And then I was like, but when? And then I'm picking them up like crazy. And I'm like, but when? How do I even get back there? When am I going to get back there? I don't know when. And it felt like it was set up. Certain things were set up as if it should be more open than it was. So that's the part that I found frustrating. I was like, I feel like these two things are disjointed a little bit.
Yeah, traversing between slums and just areas is not fun.
No, it's not fun.
There's no overarching map. It's very much like you kind of just have to remember how to get to where you need to go. And that is definitely a downfall for sure.
And there's a very small fast travel system within, I think, one of the slums where you can use chocobos to sort of move about the slum, but there's no fast travel system, but you don't need it. Because the amount of times, like especially after Chapter 14, which we'll talk about on the next episode coming out next week, that like it's a point of no return, and you don't get to go and exchange your Moogle medals or do any of the mini games after that point in the game. So like, not only is it directed at only certain places in the game where you can play mini games or like change for your Moogle medals, but there's a certain part of the game where you just good luck with, and you can't even like take side quests. Like they have to be done within a specific chapter, which I think that to me was, I understand why they needed to do it, because then, you know, the side missions stack and like the stuff in the story that you do in the side quest, a character may mention it in a later chapter, which was cool. But I just don't like the fact that unlike modern games, you can't just pick up a side quest and just, you know, continue on the chain as you go.
That and the side quests were really bundled together. And then I got kind of tired of them. I was like, oh, I'll do a few. And then I was like, oh, but I have to do like these 6 others right now. And I was like, I don't want to. Like, I've already done a bunch of them. And they're not that great. And I was like, well, I guess I'm done. Like, I can't. Whereas maybe I would have done another mission and been like, oh, I'll come back to that guy and finish that one. I do appreciate that they make it very, very clear when you're moving forward. They're like, hey, you can't go back if we keep on going. You sure you want to? I'm like, thank you. It's a base thing in games that I'm like, I appreciate every time they do it. It's a must, and they do it. So that was good. But yeah, I don't know. Things are chunked together in a way that was frustrating.
Any final thoughts here about anything but the story of Final Fantasy VII Remake?
Can I dig a little deeper on the side quest stuff before we move on, or should we save that for... Okay. I think that the biggest weakness of this game is the side quests. On the first playthrough, I did like 3 to 5 and then decided it wasn't worth my time and skipped the rest of them for the whole game. In my replay, I did all of them. And I was sort of hoping that there would be like some cool hidden stuff, or like by doing all of them, I would unlock some secret extra thing that like made me feel like my efforts were worthwhile. And I really didn't feel that reward in this game. Like, all of the side quests are in some way run and go grab this thing, run and go kill this thing, or run and go talk to this person. And like, I don't know why any of the side quests are here. none of them really make me feel connected to the core characters because they're almost all like these just random NPCs that you're helping. Like, maybe even like the little kids, like with the Moogle medals, like that's supposed to be like, hey, this community is lived in and has life and like whatever. There's hope here. But it was just a chore. And I really like this game. It's rare that I replay something. But the side quests, just that strikes me as so phoned in compared to like this game has some of the most stunning cutscenes and character models and animations I've seen like in any PlayStation game. It has some incredible music. I personally wasn't too bothered by the combat. I had a lot of fun with it. And yet, like something like the side quest, I just think that is a complete failure for this game. And that's a bummer to say when you like a game that much, and yet like I would never replay them.
I would tend to agree in every case except where a side mission leads to a minigame. Because I know that like one of the side quests early on is like, these buff men are squatting. Would you like to squat with them?
Oh,
and
yeah.
I was like, yes, of course. Buff men, so to me, that's the only exception. But my understanding
I'll
is
give you that one.
minigames, there are a lot more of them in the original game. A lot of them which are going to be converted into Rebirth, but I'm totally with you that like after experiencing the garbage side quests of Final Fantasy 16 to have like slightly better but still not great Final Fantasy 7 Remake side quests, I'm just like, why do we do side quests? Especially when characters, and keep me honest here, I think there's a side quest where one of the characters acknowledges that what you're doing is crap. And I'm just like, cool, if you write it there, that's like narrative versus gameplay designers fighting, and like that's where it manifests. But like if you acknowledge that your side missions are crap, then just cut them out.
Right.
Yeah, just keep the good ones.
I'm just happy. Yeah, I'm just happy you were here to come to bat for the squatting minigame.
Yes,
of course.
I thought you were about to say, I love smashing the boxes. I love that so much. I couldn't stand that one.
Whoa. I'll go to bat for the boxes. The boxes are kind of cool.
That's fair.
I'll go to bat for darts, but boxes I cannot.
Oh, darts was fun. I was like, I'm
cool.
not leaving here until I am top on the leaderboard on this darts. That's it. Yes, the mini games. I enjoyed myself.
Me too.
The side quest, no, but yes, the one where it leads to squatting and there's these ridiculous characters. That's the one where there was effort put in. That's the thing, right? Is that there are characters with personalities and they are well modeled and like they look great and they're funny and they're saying ridiculous stuff, and you're doing a mini game that's very simple but still like different from anything else I've done in the game. That's worth my time, as opposed to go there and fight this thing. That's what I'm doing the whole game. I'm going there and fighting things. So like, don't make me do it again unless you have an interesting story to tell, and there weren't. But yeah, I'll if you were like, oh, there's more squatting mini games, I'll be like, let me go. I'll do some pull-ups. I'll do some squatting. I'll do some bench press, whatever. Any of the workout things with ridiculous characters, I'm in.
Yeah, I agree on the side quests. They're definitely very weak. Like, in fact, when you brought it up, I'm just looking to see what they were, and I don't remember any of them except for the Johnny ones. Johnny ones are great because I like Johnny as a character just because he's a buffoon. And he's just a clown. But other than that, they're super forgettable. They're just go kill some things in the back alleys, then come back and get something that you might not even use. Yeah, I hope they do better with side quests, because side quests in modern Final Fantasy games have not been hitting the way they should. It seems like every game will have like 20 to 30, and maybe 3 or 4 are real good in each one, and that's a bummer.
One will make you cry because it's sad, and the other ones will make you cry because they're crap.
Yeah.
Hey, those are our thoughts about everything but the story of Final Fantasy VII Remake. Come back next week where the 4 of us are going to dive in and dissect the story as much as we can in a reasonable amount of time. Kyle Stephenson, thank you for coming back on the show. If folks want to find you, where can they find you?
Mr. K-Set pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, you
The
are.
Trophy Room is at PS Trophy Room and 61indie. Go check that out at 61indie.com.
Let's do the same with Katie. Where can you be found on the interwebs?
Oh, God. I've teeter-tottered back and forth. I guess I'm back on X.
Do you want me to just do it? Do you want me to just do it for you?
I'm on X. And on the other one. What's the other one called? The
Threads?
Zuckerberg
Blue Sky?
one, Threads. I'm on both
Oh,
at
Threads.
Lesbrack. Right now, I'm mostly on X, but I'm on both. I talk about video games and I repost videos of cats. That's it. I think it's fun.
Excellent.
I think you're the only person I know that refers it to
I
X.
didn't like it. It felt wrong, and I can't. I'm not
gonna yell
happy
at you
about it.
for
It's
it.
one of the reasons I left, and then I came back, and it's a struggle every day.
Flora, are you on Twitter?
Thank you.
Not these days. Weirdly enough, I for some reason can't really get into my Ludonarrative account at the moment.
Oh, no.
There's some weird security code thing that I need, and I don't know. Anyway, just find me on epiloguegaming, I guess.com. Oh, minus the I guess. epiloguegaming.com.
And on the site, you can read how Goodbye Volcano High captured my childhood experiences. That is a great article.
Thank you. It was a delight. The creators and writers and stuff all commented on it on Twitter of all places, and that was really rewarding to see. So thank you.
Again, epiloguegaming.com. That's where you can find Flora. You can find me at Jacob McCourt on all things JACOBMCCOURT, and you can find all things Left Behind Game Club on Twitter at Left Behind Club, on Instagram at Left Behind Game Club, and like I said, give us a review because it means a lot. That's all for now. We're back next week with part 2 of this thing. So until then, I will say shout out Mike Ruffalo, and that, my friends, is one less game left behind.
Video games are a unique medium.
They can tell stories,
Immerse us in strange, fantastic worlds.
blur the very boundaries of our reality.
But at the end of the day, video games are fun. Whatever fun is to you.
I'm Jeff Moonen,
And I am Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
and on Fun and Games, we talk about the history, trends, and community of video games.
It's a celebration of all the games we play and all the fun we find within them.
And there's so many more games out there, so we hope you'll share in that conversation with us.
Fun and Games podcast with Matt and Jeff. Find us on certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
And happy gaming.